Hello everyone, my name is Chris Tack and I'm the pianist with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. Welcome to our service. I wanted to say a quick thank you to all the wonderful people who've written me cards and letters in the last week or two. It really is cheering and heartwarming to hear from you, and thank you all so very, very much, and thank you for your very kind words. Stick around after the postlude and I'll tell you a little bit about the two pieces I'm playing today.
Welcome to this Baja4 collaborative worship service. I am Celeste Rogers and I am a member of UUCT. Whenever you are joining us, from wherever you are worshiping, you are welcome to bring your whole self here, now. We are the Baja4, representing Unitarian Universalists across southeastern Arizona. As Unitarian Universalists, we love beyond belief and find inspiration from a wide array of spiritual, religious, and secular sources. We come together as a Baja4 because we know we are stronger together. We represent Borderlands Unitarian Universalists in Amado, Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church in Sierra Vista, Mountain Vista Unitarian Universalist Congregation in Northwest Tucson, and the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson on the east side in Tucson. We take inspiration from the landscape around us. We find in our desert stories of resilience and change, beauty and interconnection, death and life. We acknowledge that this land was stolen from the Chiricahua Apache, Pasquayaqui, Otham, and Opata people, who are the indigenous ancestors of this land and our neighbors today. Please take a breath with me to express your gratitude for all the indigenous people who have stewarded this land for thousands of years and continue to do so today. Breathe in, breathe out. And now I will lead us in our chalice lighting words. If you have a chalice or candle nearby, please light that with me as I say these words from Sarah Eileen LaWall. Out of the flames. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames we rise.
Let freedom span both east and west, and love both south and north, in universal fellowship throughout the whole wide earth. In unity, wonder everywhere, let us communion find. Compassion be the golden cord, close binding humankind. Beyond all barriers of race, of color, caste, or creed, let us make friendship, human worth, our common faith and deed. Then east and west will meet and share, and south shall build with north, one human commonwealth of good throughout the whole wide earth.
Hi, I'm Jamili with the UU Church of Tucson, and I've been thinking a lot lately about this meme that's been going around that says, activism is a multi-lane highway. We're not all driving in the same lane, but you've got to keep your foot on the gas. I'm thinking about that today as we talk about the second principle. It reads, "We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations." And when I think about all the areas that require justice, equity, and compassion in the world these days, I feel, well, to be honest, discouraged. How can I do it all? Well, to be honest, I can't, and neither can you. But we can ask, what role can I play? One person who knew well what role she wanted to play was a white woman named Juliet Hampton Morgan. She was born in 1914 as the only child of Frank and Lila Morgan in Montgomery, Alabama. Her white skin and her family pedigree, they were very wealthy and in Alabama for a very long time, afforded her entrance into shops and restaurants and galleries and concert halls, things not available to people who were not of her stature. When she grew up, she was a public school teacher and a librarian for the Montgomery County Library. And that was an acceptable position for a white woman in society to hold in the 1930s. However, some of Juliet's activities outside of work were not as acceptable. For example, she belonged to an interracial prayer group. The group met only in black churches because the white churches wouldn't allow them to meet. Many of Juliet's friends and family members did not understand her desire to belong to this group. One seemingly insignificant thing separated her even further from her friends who lived lives of privilege. She had severe anxiety attacks. These attacks prevented her from learning to drive. So she rode the city buses everywhere that she needed to get. And on those city buses, she saw people of all races and all classes. She writes about one time when she saw a white bus driver, quote, use the tone and manner of mule drivers in their treatment of Negro passengers. And while we don't use the word Negro anymore, we clearly understand how awfully that bus driver treated the passengers of color. She watched the bus drivers threaten and humiliate black men and women who paid the same fare that she paid without harassment. One morning, Juliet tells the story of how she rode the bus and she watched a black woman pay her fare and then leave the front door of the bus to go to the back door of the bus, as she was expected to do, in order to ride in the back of the bus. As soon as the woman stepped off, the white bus driver pulled away, leaving the woman behind, even though she'd already paid her fare. Juliet got angry, and instead of just sitting there, she jumped up and she pulled the emergency cord and stopped the bus. She demanded that that bus driver go back and pick up that woman. No one on the bus could believe what they had seen. That was not something that people did. Bus drivers were allowed to get away with the mistreatment of black passengers. In the days that followed, Juliet pulled the cord every time she saw a black passenger be left behind or mistreated, effectively stopping everybody's bus route. And of course, the bus drivers were angry, city workers were angry. News spread quickly, and the drivers began to antagonize Juliet. Throughout the rest of her life, she received hate mail and death threats, and even had a cross burned on her lawn. In 1939, which was 16 years before the 1955 famous Montgomery bus boycott, Juliet began and continued her campaign to denounce the horrible injustices she witnessed on the city buses. Her last letter was published in 1957 in the Tuscaloosa News, where she thanked the newspaper editor for his opposition to a council of local white men that he believed was contributing to continued racial violence. She wrote, "I had begun to wonder if there were any men in the state, any white men, with any sane evaluation of our situation here in the middle of the 20th century, with any goodwill, and most especially with any moral courage to express it." Why is Juliet's story important? Because the stories of women and the stories of anti-racist white people cannot be left out of the teachings of the civil rights movement. The American civil rights movement was and continues to be a movement of the people, and we are the people. And Juliet Hampton Morgan was an ally. She was someone who supported and stood up for the rights and dignities of others, even when it wasn't safe for her to do so. Her story provides a powerful roadmap for us today. So the question is, what's your lane? What justice, equity, and compassion can you bring into this world? Where can you lend your voice as an ally? Where are you a leader? Everything, big and little, help us to create the beloved community that we all dream of.
Holy One, our hearts are weary, are tired, and are breaking. Our hearts are stretching as they are pulled and pushed, bruised and battered by all the suffering and brokenness and pain. Our ears are ringing with harsh words, with yelling, with gunfire that echoes in our streets and takes lives of innocents without cause. They're ringing with the affirmation that Black lives matter, again and again, until this idea is manifested in our legislation, our communities, and our hearts. We have heard stories of equality and justice, but our eyes burn from the instances of inequality, racism, and injustice that illustrate we are still far from where we hope to be. Our mouths speak words of hope, of courage, and of truth. And at times we find that words do no justice. The brokenness feels too big. Our bodies, our collective bodies, built for lifting one another up and built for holding each other in love, they're being used against one another as weapons. And the ammunition is hatred and fear. Spirit of life and love, in this time of dissonance, in this holy time of urgency to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves, help us to find our voice. Help us to see beyond this brokenness to a time of healing and true community. Help us to remember that the only journey toward healing is one that is paved through humanity, acceptance of responsibility, and counteracting complacency. Ours is not a solitary journey, but one taken together, bolstered by deep listening and deeply rooted in love. May we find the strength needed for the journey here, in this place and in all places where people gather for love, for humanity, and for justice.
Voice still and small, deep inside all, I hear you call, singing. In dark and rain, sorrow and pain, still you remain singing. Calming my fears, quenching my tears, through all the years, singing.
Please join in today's responsive reading, A Network of Mutuality by Martin Luther King Jr. by reading the line which follows, the line you will hear from me. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied to a single garment of destiny.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
There are some things in our social system to which all of us ought to be maladjusted.
Hatred and bitterness can never cure the disease of fear. Only love can do that.
We must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation.
The foundation of such a method is love.
Before it is too late, we must narrow the gaping chasm between our proclamations of peace and our lowly deeds which precipitate and perpetuate war.
One day, we must come to see that peace is not merely a distant goal that we seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal.
We must pursue peaceful ends through peaceful means.
We shall hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope.
While a college senior in Vermont, I heard the shocking news. White racists in Selma, Alabama, had beaten to death James Reeb, a Massachusetts UU minister who had responded to M.L. King's call for clergy to join a protest march on behalf of black voting rights. Responding to my history professor's challenge, in spring 1965, 4 of us set off for Alabama in my car. We arrived at the outskirts of Montgomery as marchers from Selma arrived that night in preparation for the final day's protest at the state capitol. Viola Liuzzo, a Unitarian from Detroit, had joined on day 1. After the march, the KKK shot her to death en route to the Montgomery airport as she drove protesters returning to the north, putting to the test King's nonviolent strategy. In response to the historic Alabama confrontation, Congress adopted the extraordinary 1965 Voting Rights Act that over 4 decades gradually paved the way for the election of black officials at the local, state, and national level, including a U.S. president in 2008. My personal quest for racial justice led me to teach for 16 years at 3 all-black institutions that gave me an appreciation of black nationalism. After college, 2 years as a Peace Corps volunteer in a Nigerian high school introduced me to national independence struggles against British colonial rule and South African apartheid. On return to the U.S. in 1968, I enrolled as a grad student at Columbia University in New York. White and black student protesters occupied separate buildings to protest the Vietnam War and the school's planned recreation center in a park separating the campus from Harlem. A virtual army of city police used extreme force to reopen the university. This draft dodger became a school teacher in Harlem for 2 years during a battle over black parents' control of neighborhood schools. The Jewish-led teachers union went on strike, and I joined the black faculty members in crossing a picket line to teach my classes. Let me digress here to reassure my pro-worker friends that soon after that in my career, I became a faculty union organizer, walked a picket line while on strike, and currently do labor arbitration. Columbia degree in hand, Indian wife beside me, in 1971 I headed west to become the political science department at Wilberforce U, the oldest private historically black university in the U.S. Founders in 1856 gave the name of the leading British abolitionist to the African Methodist Episcopal institution, which initially enrolled freed slaves. I took up residence in Yellow Springs as a neighbor of the white UU minister and Wilberforce faculty dean who had hired me. Nina and I became UUs at the local fellowship, to the dismay of my childhood Presbyterian minister. At Wilberforce, instead of black and white together we shall overcome, we sang the Black National Anthem by James Weldon Johnson. In addition to Martin Luther King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, along with my largely first-generation undergrads, I studied Malcolm X, Stokely Carmichael, Elbridge Cleaver, Angela Davis, Black Muslims, and the Black Panther Party advocates of armed resistance to white supremacy. When teaching the famous Brown versus Board of Education decision, I questioned Chief Justice Earl Warren's opinion rationale. He wrote, quote, "To separate some children from others of similar age and qualifications solely because of their race generates a feeling of inferiority as to their status in the community that may affect their hearts and minds in a way unlikely ever to be undone," unquote. That was inescapably true for legal segregation mandated by white supremacists, relegating black children to inferior public schools. But what of intentional black separatism in historically black universities and the exclusively black charter school in Cincinnati, where I volunteer to support minority students expelled from the city's public schools? Separatism can foster black pride, an appreciation that black is beautiful, and preserve a culture threatened by appropriation and assimilation. After leaving Wilberforce, I spent 27 years at the U of Cincinnati, teaching undergraduate and occasional law school classes on the U.S. legal system and international human rights, while mentoring minority students. Off campus, I joined ACLU campaigns to abolish the death penalty and to promote racial justice. Sister Helen Pragine helped me appreciate the gross racial disparities in administration of the death penalty. I came to view the police use of lethal force as summary execution, prohibited by international law. I retired from teaching 9 years ago and served as the executive director of UU Justice Ohio during the 2016 UU General Assembly in Columbus. I assisted UU planners in arranging for a racial justice rally on the State House steps featuring Reverend William Barber. Tornado warnings forced the event indoors, where Barber delivered a powerful call to action he renewed at the Democratic National Convention. The recent nationwide support of the Movement for Black Lives builds on, yet differs markedly from, the 1960s civil rights campaign. Women and LGBT activists today have taken the lead. Young protest leaders make clear that Martin is not coming back. Grassroots demonstrations in locales across the land far exceed prior white and black turnout, without leadership by a few celebrated senior national figures. As in the 1960s, I am uncomfortable with violent protests and advocacy for using any means necessary, endorsed by a former student of mine who now represents Black Lives Matter Cincinnati. While I appreciate the need for solidarity with oppressed Palestinians, anti-Semitic rhetoric turns me off. The Jewish philanthropist George Soros Open Society Foundation this week announced long-term 5-year grants to independent black nonprofits led by Reverend Barber, Brian Stevenson, and others. Our embrace of Black lives of UU has improved on UU qualms about black separatism in the 60s. Launched in Cleveland, Ohio, the movement for Black Lives initially excluded both white and brown. The difficult quest for a truly multiracial, multicultural future continues. A 1968 white backlash exploited by a Republican Southern strategy won the White House for Richard Nixon, a cautionary tale for this election year. Over the past half-century, I've accused my fellow UUs of enjoying pious entertainment provided by rousing Sunday sermons, and of feeling virtuous by association with Unitarians Reeb and Liuzzo, who gave their lives in the struggle. I have repeatedly questioned efforts to diversify our congregations that too often appear motivated by a desire to engage with more people of color so whites can feel better about themselves. Despite those past reservations, and the devastating impact of the current pandemic, I genuinely am keeping hope alive that 2020 and beyond will in fact bring more progress. As King reminded us, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. His inspiring vision initiated my early personal commitment to racial justice, sustained for more than half a century by other role models, Sister Helen, Reverend Barber, Michelle Alexander, Brian Stevenson, as well as by evidence of incremental progress to end the intolerable ongoing injustice to Black Americans caused by systemic racism. Remain willing, as our collective efforts have and can continue to make a difference.
Hello and welcome. Sing along with me in this next song. This is a song that some of you that have been going to UCT know from because we have sung it congregationally there in the past. It's Holly Near's song, I Am Willing. If you are unfamiliar with it, it is a repetitive or strophic song. The melody keeps coming back again with different words. At least pick up the words to the chorus, the most important part. So jump in as you can. I am open, I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It would dishonor those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. There is hurting in my family, there is sorrow in my town, there is panic in the nation, there is wailing the whole world round. And I am open, I am willing, for to be hopeless would seem so strange. It would dishonor those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. May the children see more clearly, may the elders be more wise, may the winds of change caress us, even though burns our eyes. For I am open, I am willing, to be hopeless would seem so strange. It would dishonor those who go before us, so lift me up to the light of change. Give me a mighty oak to hold my confusion. Give me a desert to hold my fears. Give me a sunset to hold my wonder. Give me an ocean to hold my tears. I am open, I am willing to be hopeless. I'm not hopeless. It seems so strange. It would dishonor those who go before us. So lift me up, to the light of change. So lift me up, to the light of change. So lift me up, to the light of change.
There's too much hardship in this world to not find joy every day. There is too much injustice in this world to not right the balance every day. There is too much pain in this world to not heal every day. Each of us ministers to a weary world. Let us go forth now and do that which calls us to make this world more loving, more compassionate, and more filled with the grace of divine presence every day. Amen.
Of course, the Maple Leaf Rag of Scott Joplin from about 1897. The prelude was also by Scott Joplin, a piece called Bethina, a concert waltz, also from about 1898 or so. Some of the ragtime music, precursor to jazz, and beautiful music for a summer Sunday. Thank you so much.